My name is Emily Carter. I'm 32. Last Tuesday at 2:47 in the afternoon, I was standing in the driveway of what used to be my childhood home, a lakeside mansion worth approximately $2.8 million, watching my sister Jessica load the last of our father's belongings into a moving truck, when she turned to me and said the words that made my hands stop shaking and start planning. "You know what your problem is, Emily? You're a quitter. You quit the military. You quit on Dad. And now you're trying to quit on accepting reality." She was wearing a cream Chanel suit, $4,200 if I remembered the price tag correctly, from when Dad bought it for her 33rd birthday. Her diamond tennis bracelet caught the September sunlight. "This house is mine. The estate is mine. Dad made his choice about who deserved his legacy, and it wasn't the daughter who abandoned him to go play soldier in the desert." I was wearing my work uniform, navy blue Carter's fuel station polo shirt with a grease stain on the left sleeve from changing oil filters all morning, cargo pants with pockets still holding tire pressure gauges and receipt paper. My hands smelled like gasoline and brake fluid. I'd driven here straight from the station on my lunch break because the moving company Jessica hired told me I had exactly 43 minutes to remove any personal items before they changed the locks. Jessica, Dad's will said Dad's will said exactly what it needed to say. She stepped closer, close enough that I could smell her perfume, something French and expensive. "He left the house and the primary assets to the child who stayed, who took care of him, who didn't choose some pointless war over her own father's cancer treatments." My throat closed. I was deployed. I couldn't just. "You chose not to get compassionate leave. You chose not to come home for his chemotherapy. You chose not to be here when he died." Each sentence landed like a slap. "And now, you choose to harass me about a legal will that 3 lawyers have validated. It's pathetic, Emily. You're pathetic." There were 6 people watching this. The moving crew, Jessica's assistant Valerie, and 2 of her book club friends who'd apparently come along to support her during this difficult time. All of them looked at me with varying degrees of pity and disgust. One of the movers actually shook his head, like I was the villain in this scene. "I have documents that say Dad set up a conditional trust, that the house was supposed to—" "What you have," Jessica interrupted, her voice dropping to that particular tone that meant she was done pretending to be civil, "is 10 years of failure and a dead-end job pumping gas. What I have is a legal team, a validated will, and ownership papers filed with the county. So I'm going to say this once more. Get off my property." My face burned so hot I could feel my pulse in my teeth, but something else happened in that moment. Something shifted because I looked at her, really looked at her, and I saw it, just for a second, the flicker of uncertainty in her left eye, the way her hand tightened on her phone. She was scared I actually had something. "Before I go on, if stories about standing up for yourself mean something to you, please hit like and subscribe and tell me in the comments where you're watching from right now and what time is it there. Because what happened next took me 6 months to understand, but it started right there in that driveway. I didn't argue. I didn't cry. I just said, "Okay," took the box of my things, Dad's Army medals that he'd kept from Vietnam, my high school graduation photo, and a coffee mug that said "World's Okayest Daughter" that he'd given me as a joke, and I walked to my truck. A 2003 Ford F-150 with 187,000 miles and a check engine light that had been on since July. As I pulled away, I looked in the rearview mirror. Jessica was standing in the driveway watching me leave. She was smiling, but her hand was still gripping that phone like she wanted to crush it. Let me take you back 11 years to understand why that smile cut deeper than any of her words. I was 21, standing in Dad's study at 9 p.m. on a Thursday night, trying to tell him I'd enlisted in the Army. He was sitting in his leather chair, the one Mom had bought him before she died when I was 6, reading glasses perched on his nose as he reviewed paperwork from his accounting firm. The room smelled like coffee and old books and the vanilla pipe tobacco he'd smoke sometimes when he thought I wasn't looking. Afghanistan? He said, not looking up from his papers. Yes, sir. I ship out in 6 weeks for basic training. He set down his pen, took off his glasses, looked at me with those gray eyes that saw through everything. You know your sister's getting married in 8 weeks. I know. I'll miss the wedding. I'm sorry. Jessica won't forgive you for that. I know that too. He stood up, walked over to the window that overlooked the lake. Our house sat on 4.2 acres of prime waterfront property, in what Dad always called the good part of town. From this window, you could see the boat dock, the gazebo where Mom used to read, and the tree line that separated our property from the Hendersons' place. Emily, I'm going to tell you something, and I need you to remember it. Can you do that? Yes, sir. Your sister loves the idea of things more than the things themselves. She loved the idea of this house, so I bought it. She loved the idea of being married, so she found someone who looked good on paper. She loves the idea of being my favorite, so she tells herself stories about you being difficult. He turned to face me. But you, kiddo, you're the one who shows up. You showed up every single day after your mother died and made me breakfast because you knew I'd forget to eat. You showed up to my firm's holiday parties even though you hated wearing dresses because you knew it made me proud. You're going to show up for this war because you think it matters. It does matter. I know. That's why I'm not going to stop you. He crossed the room and hugged me, something he rarely did. But I'm also not going to pretend Jessica won't use this against you someday. She keeps score, Emily. She always has. I remember exactly what he said next because I've replayed it 10,000 times. When that day comes, and it will come, remember that I kept score too, and I know the real numbers. I didn't understand what he meant. Not then. 6 weeks later, I left for Fort Benning. Jessica didn't come to say goodbye. She was on her honeymoon in Tuscany, posting photos of vineyards and calling Dad 4 times a day to tell him about restaurants and museums. I got one text from her. Hope you don't die over there. Someone needs to take care of Dad when he's old. I served 10 years, 3 deployments to Afghanistan. I was a supply logistics coordinator, which sounds boring but meant I was responsible for making sure 400 soldiers got food, water, ammunition, and medical supplies in a combat zone where the supply routes were actively being targeted. I got good at it, made sergeant, got commendations, sent money home to Dad every month, $800 out of my $3,200 paycheck, because he'd mentioned once that property taxes on the lakeside house were getting expensive. Jessica called me exactly 4 times in 10 years. Once to tell me Dad had prostate cancer. Once to tell me he'd finished treatment and was in remission. Once to tell me the cancer was back and it was bad this time. And once, 14 hours after he died, to tell me the funeral was in 3 days and don't bother rushing back if it's too much trouble for the army. I got emergency leave. I made it back with 6 hours to spare before the service. The funeral was on a Wednesday at 11 a.m. There were 87 people there. Dad had been well-liked in town, ran a successful accounting firm for 40 years, served on the town council, donated to the library every year. The church was full of flowers and people crying and telling stories about how Robert Carter had helped them with their taxes, or given them advice about retirement planning, or shown up to their kids' graduation. Jessica gave the eulogy. She wore black Prada and spoke for 11 minutes about what an amazing father he'd been, how he'd supported her through everything, how she'd spent his last months making sure he was comfortable and had everything he needed. She cried at exactly the right moments. People hugged her afterward and told her she was so strong, so devoted. I sat in the third row and realized she hadn't mentioned my name once. After the service, at the reception at the house, the lakeside mansion, I tried to talk to her about Dad's will and estate planning. She was surrounded by her friends, her husband Marcus, her book club, her charity board members. I approached carefully. Jessica, I know this isn't the right time, but Dad mentioned he'd set up some kind of trust structure for the house and She turned to me with tears in her eyes, real tears, or maybe just really good fake ones. Emily, I've been managing Dad's affairs for the past 8 months while you were overseas. I know exactly what's in his estate plan. He left the house and the primary assets to me, with a small trust fund for you, $25,000, to help you get settled after the military. The paperwork is with his attorney, Martin Voss. You'll get your distribution in about 6 weeks after probate. That doesn't sound right. Dad told me. Dad told you what? Her voice got sharp. Dad told you a lot of things when you actually bothered to call him. But what Dad did was trust me with his end-of-life decisions because I was here. I was the one taking him to chemotherapy at 6 a.m. I was the one sleeping in the hospital chair. I was the one holding his hand when he died. Her voice broke perfectly. Where were you, Emily? The room went quiet. About 40 people were suddenly very interested in our conversation. I was finishing my deployment. I came as soon as... You came when it was convenient. You came after he was already gone. She pressed a hand to her chest. I don't blame you for serving your country. I really don't. But you can't expect to inherit the same as someone who actually showed up for the hard parts. Marcus put his arm around her. Her friend Caroline handed her a tissue. The pastor's wife gave me a look that clearly said, "Have some decency." I apologized. I don't even remember what I said, but I know I apologized because that's what I always did when Jessica made me feel like I was the problem. I left the reception at 2:30 p.m., drove to a Denny's 3 towns over, and sat in a booth for 2 hours drinking coffee and trying to remember what Dad had actually told me about his estate plan. He'd mentioned a conditional trust. He'd said something about making sure the right daughter got the right things. He'd sent me paperwork to sign 3 years ago, something about being a beneficiary, but I'd been in Kandahar, and the documents had gotten lost in a mail mix-up, and by the time I'd asked him to resend them, he'd said, "Don't worry about it, kiddo. I've got it handled." I had nothing. No copies. No proof. Just a memory of a conversation that might have meant something, or might have been Dad making small talk. I stayed in town for a week, sleeping in a budget motel that charged $68 a night and smelled like bleach and cigarette smoke. I went to the attorney's office, Martin Voss, who'd handled Dad's legal work for 25 years. He was sympathetic, but firm. Emily, I understand this is difficult, but the will is very clear. Your father left the house, the investment accounts, and the business assets to Jessica. You receive a one-time distribution of $25,000 from a separate trust fund. The will was updated 8 months ago when your father's cancer returned, and it was properly witnessed and executed. But Dad told me about a conditional trust, something about the house being held in. There is no conditional trust in the current will. Perhaps your father discussed options at some point, but what he ultimately decided is documented here. He slid a copy across his desk. It was 18 pages. It very clearly left everything to Jessica, except for that $25,000. I read it 3 times. The signature looked like Dad's. The witnesses were people I recognized, Jessica's friend Diane and her husband Marcus. Can I get a copy of any previous wills or estate documents from before this one? I'm afraid those are destroyed upon creation of a new will, per standard practice. And even if they weren't, they'd have no legal bearing. I left his office and sat in my truck for 40 minutes. Then I called Dad's accountant, a man named Leonard Shaw, who'd worked with Dad for 15 years. He agreed to meet me for coffee. Emily, I'm so sorry for your loss, Leonard said. He was 60-something, wore suspenders and wire-rimmed glasses, looked like someone's favorite grandfather. Your dad was a good man. Mr. Shaw, did my dad ever talk to you about setting up a conditional trust for the lakeside property? His face changed, just slightly, a tightening around his eyes. Why do you ask? Because my sister says Dad left everything to her, but I remember Dad mentioning something different, something about conditions or tests or... Emily. He leaned forward, lowering his voice, even though we were the only people in this coffee shop at 4 p.m. on a Thursday. I can't discuss the details of your father's financial planning without violating confidentiality, but I will tell you this. Your father was a meticulous man. He didn't make impulsive decisions about his estate, and he very specifically asked me, about 3 years ago, to help him structure something that would test character over time. My heart rate picked up. What does that mean? It means your father believed that how people behave when they think no one's watching tells you who they really are. He finished his coffee. I can't say more, but I will say this. If I were you, I'd ask to see the original documents, not copies, originals. And I'd ask when exactly that will was updated and who was in the room when it happened. He left cash on the table for his coffee and walked out. I went back to Martin Voss's office the next day. Asked to see the original will. Was told that originals were kept in a secure location and that copies were sufficient for probate. Asked when exactly the will was updated. Was told 8 months ago, but given no specific date. Asked who was present when Dad signed it. Was told the required witnesses as documented in the will itself. Every answer was technically correct and completely unhelpful. I flew back to Fort Campbell, Kentucky, where I was stationed while processing my discharge. I had $4,200 in my bank account. The military had been my life for 10 years, and now I was officially a civilian with no job, no degree, no plan. I had a 2003 F-150 truck, a storage unit full of deployment gear and old uniforms, and a check coming for $25,000 that was supposed to be my entire inheritance from a father who'd owned property worth nearly $3 million. Jessica called me twice during those weeks. Once to tell me the house was being appraised and she was thinking about selling it, since the property taxes are astronomical, and she didn't really need a house that big. Once to ask if I wanted any of Mom's old jewelry before she donated it to a church charity auction. I said no to the jewelry. I couldn't afford to ship it, and I couldn't stand the thought of Jessica's fake sympathy when she handed it over. The $25,000 check arrived 6 weeks later, exactly when Martin Voss said it would. I deposited it and felt nothing. It should have felt like money. It felt like being told I was worth exactly $25,000 to my own father. I drove west for 3 days, no destination in mind, sleeping in the truck at rest stops and eating gas station sandwiches. On the 3rd day, I ended up in a small town called Millbrook, population 8,400, somewhere in the middle of Missouri. I stopped at a gas station to fill up and saw a help wanted sign in the window. The owner was a man named Ray Kowalski, 70 years old, Polish immigrant, ran Carter's fuel station for 40 years. He was selling the business and retiring to Florida. "You know anything about cars?" he asked. "I kept a fleet of Humvees running in a combat zone for 3 years. I can probably handle a fuel pump." He hired me on the spot, offered me $32,000 a year plus free rent in the apartment above the station. It was 600 square feet, 1 bedroom, smelled like motor oil, and had water stains on the ceiling. But it was mine. I worked there for 4 months before Ray told me he was serious about retiring and asked if I wanted to buy the business. "I've got $28,000 left from my inheritance," I said. "That's not enough for—" "The business is worth about $180,000. But I'll sell it to you for $120,000 if you can get a business loan for the difference and commit to keeping the name. My dad opened Carter's in 1982. I'd like it to stay Carter's." I went to 3 banks, got rejected by all of them, tried a 4th bank, a small credit union that specialized in veteran loans. The loan officer was a woman named Patricia Chen who'd served in the Air Force. She looked at my discharge papers, my credit history, my business plan that I'd written in a panic the night before. "You've never run a business." "No, ma'am, but I ran supply logistics for 400 people in an active combat zone. I can run a gas station in Missouri." She approved the loan. $95,000 at 7.2% interest, 15-year term. Monthly payment of $856. I bought Carter's fuel station on a Tuesday in March. Ray trained me for 2 weeks, then moved to Sarasota and sent me postcards of beaches. The business was harder than I'd expected. The fuel pumps needed replacing, $8,400. The roof leaked, $3,200 to repair. The inventory system was still on paper, so I had to learn QuickBooks, while also learning how to manage suppliers, state inspections, employee scheduling for the 2 part-time workers I'd inherited, and approximately 800 other things that no one teaches you about owning a small business. I was working 70 hours a week. I woke up at 5 a.m., opened the station at 6, worked the counter until my assistant manager Sarah came in at noon, spent the afternoon doing maintenance and bookkeeping, closed at 10 p.m., and fell asleep to YouTube videos about small business accounting. I loved it. Every exhausting, frustrating, impossible minute of it. Jessica called me once during those first 6 months, asked how I was doing. I told her I'd bought a gas station. There was a long pause. A gas station? Emily, I mean, that's good that you're working, but don't you want something with more, I don't know, prestige? You served your country. You could probably get a government job or. I like the gas station. Okay, well, I'm glad you're settling in somewhere. Another pause. Listen, I wanted to let you know I sold the lakeside house. Got $2.9 million for it. After taxes and fees, I netted about $2.3 million. I'm investing most of it, but I'm also planning a trip to Europe to scatter some of Dad's ashes in places he always wanted to visit. I thought you might want to contribute to the trip fund, since it's for both of us. I was standing behind the counter at Carter's, watching a customer pump $47 worth of regular unleaded. How much would I need to contribute? I was thinking $5,000. The trip is going to cost about $30,000 total, so it seems fair that you'd cover a portion since you'd be part of the memorial. I had $1,200 in my personal checking account. My next loan payment was due in 6 days. I can't afford that right now, Jessica. Oh. Her tone shifted. Well, I understand you're going through a transition. I'll cover your portion this time. But Emily, you really need to think about your long-term financial planning. Dad would want you to be more stable. I hung up and stood there for a long time, watching cars come and go. 8 months after I bought the station, Jessica showed up. It was a Saturday afternoon in November. I was wearing coveralls because I'd been in the maintenance bay changing oil on a customer's Honda Civic. I had grease under my fingernails and my hair in a ponytail, and I probably smelled like sweat and WD-40. She pulled up in a silver Mercedes-Benz, new model, probably $75,000. Stepped out wearing designer jeans and a cashmere sweater. Her nails were perfect. Her makeup was perfect. She looked like she'd stepped out of a catalog for people who summer in the Hamptons. I was ringing up a customer at the counter when she walked in. She looked around the station. The slightly dingy tile floor, the flickering fluorescent lights, the coffee machine that only worked half the time, the rack of motor oil and beef jerky and lottery tickets. And I saw her expression shift from curiosity to something that looked like pity mixed with disgust. Emily, hi. I was in the area and thought I'd stop by and see how you're doing. The customer I was helping, an older man named George who came in every Saturday for a lottery ticket and a Mountain Dew, looked between us, sensing tension. That'll be $3.75, Mr. Peterson, I said, handing him his change. He took his ticket and left quickly. Jessica walked up to the counter. So, this is it? This is the big dream? It's a business. It pays the bills. Emily. She leaned on the counter, lowering her voice like she was about to share something confidential. I've been thinking about you a lot lately, about your situation, and I feel bad that you're stuck here doing this when you could be doing so much more. I'm not stuck. I chose this. Did you, though? Or did you just take the first job that would hire you because you didn't have any other options? She smiled, but it wasn't kind. I'm not judging, I'm really not. I just think you've always sold yourself short. Even Dad used to say you had potential but never really applied yourself. My hands tightened on the edge of the counter. Dad never said that. He did, actually. He said it to me all the time. He worried about you. She glanced around again. And seeing this, I understand why he worried. Emily, you're 32 years old and you're working at a gas station. You could have used your military benefits to go to college. You could have gotten a real career. Instead, you're here, changing oil and selling cigarettes. The door chimed. Sarah, my assistant manager, walked in for her shift. She was 24, going to community college for business management, and one of the hardest workers I'd ever met. She looked at Jessica, then at me, and I saw her read the situation immediately. Hey, Emily, you want me to take over the register so you can finish that Honda? Yeah, thanks, Sarah. Jessica watched this exchange with barely concealed amusement. You have employees? That's good. Sarah's not my employee. She's my assistant manager. She runs the evening shifts. That's wonderful that you're giving young people opportunities. Jessica picked up a pack of gum from the display, examined it, put it back. Listen, the reason I stopped by is because I wanted to tell you in person. I'm getting married again. Marcus and I divorced 6 months ago. It just didn't work out, and I met someone new. His name is David Thornton. He owns a commercial real estate development company. The wedding is going to be at the Lakeside Mansion. You sold that house. I sold it to David, who, well, his company bought it as an investment property. They're going to renovate it and flip it, but he's letting me use it for the wedding first. It's going to be beautiful. 200 guests, string quartet, catering from that French restaurant Dad loved. She paused. I'd invite you, but I wasn't sure if you'd be able to afford the travel, and I didn't want to put you in an awkward position. Something hardened inside me in that moment. Not anger exactly, something colder and more durable. That's thoughtful of you, I said. She must have heard something in my tone because she looked at me more carefully. Are you okay, Emily? You seem different. I'm fine, just busy. I've got a car waiting. Right, of course. She picked up her purse. It was good to see you. Maybe we can have lunch sometime, when you're less busy. There's a lot we should talk about. Dad's estate, family things. Sure. She left. I watched her drive away in her Mercedes. Sarah came over and stood next to me. Was that your sister? Yeah. She seems nice. She's really not. Sarah was quiet for a moment. You okay? Yeah. I'm going to finish that oil change. I went back to the maintenance bay and worked on the Honda. My hands weren't shaking anymore. They were steady. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about what Jessica had said about Dad worrying about me selling myself short. I kept thinking about the wedding at the lakeside house that should have been partially mine. I kept thinking about $2.3 million and a gas station and the way Jessica had looked at me like I was something pitiable. At 11:47 p.m., I got up and pulled out the box of Dad's things I'd taken from the house. The medals, the photo, the coffee mug. And underneath all of that, something I'd forgotten about. A key. It was small, brass, with a number stamped on it. 847. It was attached to a keychain that said First National Bank of Clearwater. Clearwater was the town where Dad's accounting firm had been, about 30 miles from the lakeside house. I'd never seen this key before. It must have been in the box of things the moving company let me take, mixed in with the metals. I held it for a long time, trying to remember if Dad had ever mentioned a safe deposit box. He hadn't, at least not to me. In the morning, I called First National Bank of Clearwater, asked if they had a record of a box registered to Robert Carter. We do, but I can't give you access without proper authorization. Are you listed as an authorized user? I don't know. I'm his daughter. Can you come in with identification and proof of relationship? We can check our records. I drove to Clearwater the next Tuesday, my day off. Brought my birth certificate, my driver's license, and a copy of Dad's death certificate. The bank manager, A woman named Helen Pritchard looked up the box. You're listed as an authorized user. Has been since the box was opened 3 years ago. 3 years ago? Right around when Dad had sent me those documents to sign that got lost in the mail. Can I access it? Of course. Follow me. She led me to the vault. Open box 847. Inside was a large manila envelope, unsealed, with my name written on it in Dad's handwriting. I took it to a private room, sat down, opened it. Inside were documents, a lot of documents. The first was a letter, handwritten on Dad's accounting firm letterhead. I recognized his handwriting immediately, the careful capital letters, the way he dotted his I's with little circles instead of dots, a habit from his architecture drafting days before he became an accountant. I started reading and my hands started shaking. Dear Emily, if you're reading this, then I'm gone, and Jessica is already doing exactly what I knew she would do. She's told you the house is hers. She's told you I left everything to her. She's probably told you I said you were a disappointment, or that you abandoned me, or some version of a story that makes her look like the devoted daughter, and you look like the ungrateful one. She's lying. But you already know that, don't you? You've always known when Jessica lies. You just never called her on it because you wanted to keep the peace. I can't keep the peace anymore, kiddo, and neither should you. 3 years ago, when the cancer came back, I knew I didn't have much time. I also knew Jessica would try to manipulate the estate. She'd been asking about the house, about my retirement accounts, about making sure everything was organized in case something happened to me. She started inviting herself over more often, started offering to drive me to doctor's appointments, started slowly cutting you out by telling me you were too busy to talk, that you'd called and I'd been asleep, that you'd sent cards that never arrived. I'm not senile, Emily. I kept track. I know you called every Sunday at 3 p.m. like clockwork. I know you sent money every month. I know you got emergency leave and flew 7,000 miles to make it to my funeral. I also know Jessica forged my signature on a new will 8 months before I died. I know because I never signed it. I know because the witnesses were her friend and her husband, and I was in the hospital unconscious from medication when the document was supposedly executed. I know because my real will, the one I had Martin Voss draw up 3 years ago, is still the legal will. The other document is fraud. The original will is with my attorney but not Martin Voss. It's with Thomas Riley. His office is at 445 Ashford Street in Millbrook. Yes, Millbrook, the town where you're reading this. I checked property records last month. You bought Carter's fuel station. I'm so proud of you, kiddo. Here's what you need to know. The lakeside mansion was placed in a conditional trust. Jessica has the right to live there and manage it, but she doesn't own it outright. The trust has specific conditions. If she sells the house without my explicit written authorization, which I never gave, the trust is violated and ownership transfers to you. The trust documents are with Thomas Riley. The sale Jessica made to David Thornton's company is void. She sold property she didn't own. The real estate company can sue her for fraud, and they will when they find out. The $2.3 million she received from that sale is legally yours. She owes you every penny, plus interest. I've also left evidence of her financial manipulation over the past 3 years. Forged checks, withdrawn funds from my accounts using a power of attorney she claimed I signed but didn't, and falsified medical documents claiming I was incompetent when I wasn't. Thomas Riley has all of it. He's been my attorney for the past 3 years, working separately from Martin Voss because I knew Martin was too friendly with Jessica's social circle. Thomas has been waiting for you to find this box. You don't have to do anything with this information right now. You can take your time. But when you're ready, when Jessica pushes too far, which she will, you have everything you need. You are not a quitter, Emily. You are not a disappointment. You are the daughter who showed up every single day, even from 7,000 miles away. You are the daughter who made me proud. Jessica loves the idea of family. You love the actual family. I kept score, kiddo. And you won. All my love, Dad. Your favorite accountant. I read it 4 times, then I sat on the floor of that bank room and cried for 20 minutes straight. The rest of the documents were exactly what Dad said. The original trust agreement, showing the conditional ownership structure. Bank statements showing withdrawals Jessica had made using a forged power of attorney. Copies of the fake will with analysis from a forensic handwriting expert proving Dad's signature was forged. Photos of Dad's real signature on documents from the same time period for comparison. Medical records showing he was lucid and competent during the period when Jessica claimed he was too sick to know what he was signing. And a receipt for the safe deposit box, paid through 2028, with a note in Dad's handwriting. Annual renewal $180, paid from account number 4721. Emily is authorized user. Do not notify Jessica. I gathered everything carefully, put it back in the envelope, walked out of the bank in a daze. Thomas Riley's office was 15 minutes away. I drove there on autopilot, walked into a small law office above a dry cleaner. The receptionist was a woman in her 60s who looked at me and immediately said, "You must be Emily Carter." "How did you—" "Mr. Riley has been waiting for you for 3 years. He'll be so relieved. Please, have a seat. I'll let him know you're here." Thomas Riley was 68 years old, retired military JAG Corps, silver hair and a firm handshake. He looked at the envelope I was carrying and smiled. "Your father was one of the smartest men I've ever met. He planned for everything." "Why didn't you contact me? If you knew Jessica forged the will?" "Because your father specifically instructed me not to. He said you needed to find this yourself, in your own time. He said if I contacted you first, you'd think I was trying to manipulate you, and you'd trust Jessica's version of events. He said you'd only believe it if you discovered the truth yourself." He gestured to a chair. "Please sit. We have a lot to discuss." We talked for 3 hours. He explained the legal strategy Dad had prepared. The conditional trust was ironclad. Jessica's sale of the house was void because she'd violated the trust terms. The real estate company, Thornton Development, had no legal ownership. When they found out, they'd sue Jessica for fraud and breach of contract. The $2.3 million Jessica received would have to be returned. She'd also face criminal charges for forgery, elder fraud, and financial exploitation. "But," Thomas said carefully, "your father left you a choice. You can pursue this legally, which means exposing Jessica's fraud, recovering the property and money, and likely seeing her face criminal charges. Or you can walk away. Keep the gas station, keep your life, let Jessica think she won. Your father wanted you to know you had both options." "What did he think I'd choose?" "He thought you'd choose truth, but he wanted to make sure you chose it because it was right, not because you had no other choice." I drove back to Carter's and worked my shift, pumped gas, sold lottery tickets, changed oil, acted like my entire world hadn't just shifted. That night, Jessica called. "Emily, hi. I wanted to follow up on our conversation about the wedding. I've been thinking, and I actually would like you to come. You're my sister, and despite our differences, family is important." The wedding is in 6 weeks on Saturday, December 14th at 6 p.m. It's going to be at the Lakeside Mansion. David is hosting a charity auction the same evening to raise funds for the Children's Hospital. It's a big event, about 150 people, donors, business contacts, society people. I'd really like you to be there. Why? Why? Because you're my sister. Jessica, you told me 3 weeks ago you weren't inviting me because I couldn't afford the travel. I changed my mind. Can't I change my mind? Her voice had that edge that meant she was about to get emotional. "Emily, I feel like we've grown apart, and I want to fix that. This wedding is a new beginning for me, and I'd like it to be a new beginning for us too." Something about her tone was wrong, too insistent, too eager. "I'll think about it. Please come. I'm even willing to help with travel expenses if that's an issue. I can send you $500 for gas and a hotel." She'd never offered me money for anything, ever. "Why do you really want me there, Jessica?" Long pause. "Fine. You want the truth? David's family is very traditional, very big on family values. They've asked about you, about why my only sister isn't involved in my life. It looks bad that I'm getting married, and my sister isn't even coming. So yes, partly I want you there because it helps my image, but that doesn't mean I don't also genuinely want to reconnect. At least she was being honest, sort of. I'll let you know. I called Thomas Riley the next morning. If I pursue this, how does it work? We file a motion to invalidate the sale and restore the trust. We submit the evidence of forgery. The judge will likely order an immediate freeze on the property and Jessica's assets pending investigation. Jessica will be notified, and she'll have the opportunity to respond, but given the evidence, her response won't matter much. When should we file? Whenever you're ready. I thought about Dad's letter, about Jessica standing in the driveway telling me I was pathetic, about her showing up at my gas station with pity and contempt, about her selling a house that wasn't hers and pocketing $2.3 million. File it on December 14th, the day of the wedding. Time it so the notice is served during the charity auction. Thomas was quiet for a long moment. Your father said you had his sense of timing. Is that legal? Perfectly legal. The court operates on regular business hours, but service can happen any time. If that's when you want the truth to come out, that's your right. Then that's when I want it. The next 6 weeks were surreal. Jessica called me twice more, confirming I was coming to the wedding, telling me what to wear. Something nice, but not too flashy. David's family is old money and they notice these things. Sending me details about parking and timing. I bought a dress. Navy blue, simple, $89 from Macy's. Got my hair cut. Took the day off from Carter's. December 14th was a Saturday. Sunny, 42 degrees, one of those crisp winter days where everything looks sharp and clear. I drove to the lakeside mansion, my lakeside mansion according to the trust, and parked among the Mercedes and BMWs and Teslas. The house looked exactly the same. The white colonial facade, the wraparound porch, the view of the frozen lake beyond. There were white tents set up on the lawn for the charity auction, heaters running, about 150 people milling around in cocktail attire. I walked in and found Jessica immediately. She was wearing a cream-colored gown, probably $8,000, hair in an elaborate updo, holding court with a group of women who all looked like they'd stepped out of a country club brochure. She saw me and her face lit up. "Emily, you came! Oh my God, you actually came!" She rushed over and hugged me, and for a second, I almost believed she was genuinely happy. "You look great," she said, stepping back to examine my Macy's dress. "That's cute. Very you." David appeared. Tall, salt and pepper hair, expensive suit, the kind of confidence that comes from never having been told no. "You must be Emily. Jessica's told me so much about you. Thank you for serving our country." "Thank you." "Jessica says you run a gas station now? That's wonderful. Small businesses are the backbone of America." He meant well, but his tone was the same as Jessica's, polite condescension. The wedding ceremony was at 6 p.m. In the living room, in front of the fireplace where I'd opened Christmas presents as a kid. About 60 people attended. I sat in the back. Jessica married David in a ceremony that lasted 12 minutes and included readings about love and partnership and building a future together. Afterward, everyone moved to the tents for the charity auction. There were silent auction tables with donated items, golf packages, spa weekends, signed sports memorabilia, artwork. There was a stage with a podium. There were waiters with champagne and hors d'oeuvres. Jessica and David stood on the stage at 7:30 p.m. to welcome everyone. "Thank you all for being here," Jessica said, microphone in hand, glowing in the tent lights. "This night means so much to David and me. We wanted to combine our celebration with something that gives back to this community that's given us so much. Tonight's auction will raise funds for Clearwater Children's Hospital, a cause that's close to both our hearts." Applause. She smiled, radiant. "I also want to say something personal. Many of you know I lost my father, Robert Carter, 2 years ago. He raised me in this beautiful home, and he taught me that success is never a solo journey. It's about the people who support you, who believe in you, who show up when it matters. Her voice caught perfectly. Dad showed up for me every single day, and I like to think I showed up for him when he needed me most. More applause. Someone in the front row, one of her book club friends, dabbed at her eyes. I stood near the back, next to a table of signed wine bottles, and felt my jaw tighten. Jessica continued. Tonight, in this house that my father loved, I'm starting a new chapter. With a man who shares my values, with friends who've supported me, and with a sister who I'm so grateful could be here. She looked directly at me. Emily, thank you for coming. It means the world. Everyone turned to look at me. I managed a small wave. The auction started. Items were presented. Bids were called out. Paddles were raised. At 8:15 p.m., during a lull between auction items, I saw Thomas Riley walk into the tent. He was wearing a suit and carrying a briefcase. He walked directly to the stage, where Jessica was about to introduce the next auction item. Excuse me, he said, his voice cutting through the murmur of conversation. I apologize for the interruption. My name is Thomas Riley. I'm an attorney representing the estate of Robert Carter. Jessica's face changed, just slightly. The smile stayed, but her eyes went sharp. I'm sorry, this isn't really the time. Ms. Carter, I need to serve you with legal documents regarding the property known as 4250 Lakeshore Drive. He opened his briefcase and pulled out an envelope. This is a motion to invalidate the sale of this property and restore it to its rightful ownership under the terms of Robert Carter's conditional trust. The tent went silent, Jessica's face drained of color. I don't know what you're talking about. This is my property. I sold it legally. You sold property you didn't own. The trust agreement, which was established 3 years ago, clearly states that you had the right to reside here, but not to sell without the explicit written authorization of the trustee. You violated those terms. The sale to Thornton Development is void. David stepped forward. Now wait just a minute. My company purchased this property in good faith. We have a deed, You have a fraudulent deed, Mr. Thornton. The documents I'm filing with the court include forensic evidence that Robert Carter's will, the will that supposedly gave Ms. Carter ownership, was forged. His real will, which I drafted 3 years ago, maintains the conditional trust structure. Jessica grabbed the microphone. This is insane. Emily, did you put him up to this? Did you hire some lawyer to come in here and disrupt my wedding with these ridiculous accusations? Thomas turned and looked at me. Would you like to speak, Ms. Carter? I walked to the stage. Every eye in the tent followed me. I took the microphone from Jessica's hand. I didn't hire him, I said, my voice steady. Our father did, 3 years ago. Because he knew exactly what you'd do. Jessica's mouth opened. No sound came out. I continued. Dad left me a letter. It's in a safe deposit box in Clearwater. In it, he explained that you'd been manipulating his estate planning, forging documents, isolating him from me. He explained that he'd set up a conditional trust specifically to test whether you'd respect his wishes or exploit them. That's not, I never. He also left bank statements showing you withdrew $47,000 from his accounts, using a power of attorney you forged. Medical records proving he was lucid when you claimed he was incompetent. And photographs of his real signature compared to the forged will you had witnessed by your friend Diane and your ex-husband Marcus. The crowd was dead silent. David's face had gone from confused to horrified. Jessica's book club friends were staring at her like they'd never seen her before. Jessica's voice went shrill. You have no proof. You're making this up because you're jealous. You've always been jealous of me. You couldn't stand that Dad loved me more, that he left me the house, that I had the successful life and you were stuck changing oil in some nowhere town. I have discharge papers from my military service, I said calmly. I have shift logs from the hospital showing where I was when you claim I abandoned Dad. I have phone records showing I called him every Sunday at 3 p.m. for 10 years. I have bank records showing I sent him $800 a month to help with property taxes. And I have his letter, in his handwriting, explaining exactly what you did. Thomas stepped forward again. The court has reviewed the evidence. A freeze has been placed on all assets derived from the sale of this property, pending a full investigation. Ms. Carter, you're required to appear in court on December 28th. Mr. Thornton, your company will need to file a separate civil suit to recover your losses, as you were sold property by someone who had no legal right to sell it. Jessica's legs seemed to give out. She sat down hard on the edge of the stage. David stared at her. You told me you owned this house outright. You showed me documents. I did own it. I do own it. This is all a misunderstanding. Emily is confused. She's angry because she got a smaller inheritance and she's trying to. The documents don't lie, Thomas said. Your signature on the forged will is different from your father's actual signature on documents from the same period. The forensic analysis is conclusive. One of Jessica's friends, Caroline, I think, stood up. Jessica, is this true? Did you forge your father's will? No, I may have helped him with some paperwork when he was sick, but that's not the same as. You told us you were the devoted daughter, another friend said, her voice cold. You told us Emily abandoned him. She did abandon him. She chose the military over her own father. I chose to serve my country, I said quietly, and I still called him every week, still sent him money, still made it home for his funeral. You just told him I didn't call. You intercepted my cards. You lied to him about me so you could control his estate. Jessica looked at me with pure hatred. You were always Dad's favorite. No matter what I did, it was never enough because you were the perfect one, the noble soldier, the one with integrity. She spat the word like it was poison. So he left you the house. Fine, take it, take everything. You'll still be a nobody running a pathetic gas station. And you'll still be someone who forged her father's will for money, I said. I'm not here for revenge, Jessica. I'm here for the truth. Dad knew this day would come. He prepared for it. These documents speak for themselves. I handed the microphone back to Thomas and walked off the stage. Behind me, I heard David say, very quietly, "The wedding is over." I drove back to Millbrook and went to the cemetery where Dad was buried. It was 10:30 p.m., dark and cold, but I had a flashlight. I found his grave and sat down on the frozen ground. I did it, Dad, I said out loud. I showed up. I stayed there for 20 minutes, crying and laughing and feeling like I could finally breathe. Over the next 3 weeks, everything unraveled for Jessica. The court investigation confirmed the forgery. The sale to Thornton Development was voided. David's company sued Jessica for fraud. She'd sold them property she didn't own and kept $2.3 million. They won a judgment for the full amount plus legal fees and damages. Jessica couldn't pay. She'd already spent most of the money on the European trip, the wedding, investments that tanked, and legal fees trying to fight the case. She declared bankruptcy. Her social circle evaporated. Turns out wealthy people don't like being associated with fraud. The trust was restored. The lakeside mansion reverted to me as the rightful beneficiary. Thomas explained that I could live there, sell it, rent it, or keep it as an investment. I chose to sell it. I didn't need a $2.8 million house. I needed closure. I sold it in March for $2.95 million. After taxes and fees, I netted $2.4 million. I paid off my business loan for Carter's fuel station, upgraded the pumps, fixed the roof properly, gave Sarah a raise and promoted her to general manager, hired 2 more employees so I could actually take days off. I put $1 million in investments for retirement, donated $200,000 to veterans services, set up a scholarship fund in Dad's name for children of military families, $50,000 a year for the next 10 years. And I kept the gas station because I liked it, because it was mine, because it represented the life I'd chosen, not the life someone else thought I should want. Jessica sent me one email, 6 months after the auction. No subject line, just one sentence. I hope you're happy now. I didn't respond. 1 year later, I'm standing behind the counter at Carter's on a Saturday afternoon. Sarah's handling a customer. The new pumps are working perfectly. The roof doesn't leak. I've got $47,000 in the business checking account, and we're profitable for the first time since I bought the place. My phone buzzes. It's a message from Thomas Riley. Thought you'd want to know. The scholarship fund made its first award, 4 students. Full ride to state universities. Your father would be proud. I look around the gas station, the slightly dingy tile floor that I've learned to appreciate, the fluorescent lights that I finally fixed, the coffee machine that works perfectly now. Through the window, I can see the Missouri sky, wide and blue. This is enough. This is more than enough. If you're watching this, and you've ever had someone tell you that your choices make you worth less, that your path makes you small, that showing up isn't the same as being successful, I want you to type something in the comments. If you walked away from someone who made you feel small to protect yourself, type, I walked away. Or if you chose to stay and fight for your truth, type, I stayed and fought. Both are brave. Both are valid. And if this story meant something to you, check the description for more stories just like this one. Thank you for being here.